I am the complaintee. Is that the right legal term? Complainer, complaintee. I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion. So, yeah, Vice Chair.
Thank you. So I'll turn over to the town administrator, but I would start by saying you mentioned we had 2, and I have 1 in front of me.
You should have another one that I just gave you.
Okay.
There's one that you just got, and then there should be one in your original packet.
Oh, okay. I don't believe I have the new one.
Yeah, it says right up front, this is the second formal complaint.
Thank you. Anything from the town administrator?
Now that the complaints came in, and you folks need to figure out how to deal with it.
So has everybody had a chance to review the complaints? And I would ask both of them, or are we going to consider both, one or both of them this evening? Has everybody read both of them?
Yes.
All right, well, I guess the appropriate thing to do would be to at least summarize what the complaints are. And unfortunately, they're both 2 pages, so I don't know how quickly I can summarize, but
Maybe instead of summarizing it, I'm not saying you won't summarize correctly, but
you want me to read?
I don't know if we should read it or I don't know what. Again, this is kind of new to me, so I would encourage you that we make the official full wordage the official part of the minutes and not paraphrase for the public record.
We can enter them into.
Yes.
I would certainly agree with that. But we need to start the discussion somehow. And I don't know whether that's best by reading through the complaints, and if that is, then I will proceed. Starting with the one dated 10/27/11. Town Administrator Schenkel, please consider this to be my formal complaint against Hooksett Town Council Chairman Bill Cyrack. I feel that the chairman acted inappropriately and contrary to town council rules at the October 12, 2011 town council meeting. The following is a list of those inappropriate actions resulting in disrespectful behavior towards a citizen he is supposed to be representing. Number 1, prior to my speaking at the meeting, the chairman received a copy of Town Council Rule G from another council. Immediately upon seeing the document, the chairman said, "I understand this clearly, I am familiar with it." The chair tried to use this rule to restrict my remarks to issues of which the council have governance over. It was later pointed out by the vice chairman that this rule did not apply to the public input portion of the meeting, that it was in fact the wrong rule being cited and used against me. Number 2, when I attempted to point out that my opinion and supported by the information I had sent the counselor, I'm going to try that one again. When I attempted to point out that my opinion and supported by the information I had sent the council prior to the meeting, that the chairman had made a false statement, I was gavelled down and ruled out of order. Later, the chairman explained, one of the reasons I gavelled you down the second time was you already started making demeaning remarks about me. In respectful rebuttal to the chair's position, my claim and complaint is that by saying he had made a false statement, it was not a demeaning remark in itself towards his personality in accordance with and adherence to the council rules. Number 3, the chair demanded I remove myself from that seat numerous times rather than discuss the issue or simply allow me to continue to speak. In fact, the chairman should not be encouraging or engaging in any debate and responses with the public during the public input session per council rules. Number 4, In explaining why he gavelled me down, the chair said the following: I have received a number of complaints and concern from council members concerned about disparaging remarks, personality exchanges during public input, to a point where I know in the past people have resigned or not run for office because of these kinds of hostilities that sometimes come from public input. I felt these remarks were directed at me personally, yet I had never made a disparaging remark during public input. Once again, I cite town council rules which prohibit rebuttal comments being made to the public during public input session, which are demeaning in its intent towards the public offering their opinion. In closing, I feel that Chairman Syrak was overreaching his authority as chair and attempting to stifle my public statement with his inappropriately interruptions from his position of power. All of these inappropriate actions taken by the chair are inconsistent with the standards of currently adopted council rules. And that was sincerely submitted by David Pearl at 79 Main Street. I think it is appropriate to stop now and open up discussion at the table of that particular complaint. I will ask that everybody everybody speak once and allow everybody else who has a comment to speak before speaking again. And I open the floor. Jim?
Being chairman of any board is not always an easy task. Not being a chair previously can be a little overwhelming, and it takes time, over a period of time, to be able to make sure you're doing the proper way in dealing with whether it's a fellow councilor or with citizens. So if you're not a chair, as I said, the first time can be a little difficult, and we do make mistakes. My belief as for someone who's a chairman is they have no more authority ultimately than any other member of the board. Collectively, we make the decisions. There is a need for a spokesman as determined, and I think we've dealt with that now over the past couple of weeks on what is the proper procedure to do that. As I said, chairmen will make mistakes, and as a council, we acted as a council and decided to overrule that decision and allow that person to continue speaking. So we acted as the board is responsible for. Part of the problem I see, especially in light of recent weeks after best practices program, where it was thrived into our head to communicate, I think in this case, due to the lack of communication, from my point of view, from people beyond our control, it put a undue burden on our current chairman. Why could the press? I'm talking about this thing, and it's all coming. So I can continue on if you would like, but I'm almost finished. I mean, I don't know when can I not talk and when I can, but that's another story. I understand, Todd. Okay. So that is result. So as a result of someone making a comment in the paper who happened to be a chair, that comment could have come from me. And how I would have responded, I don't know. Maybe similar to what was said. And I saw that. So I saw what was appeared in the paper, not something that I felt was inappropriate. But that goes beyond the point. The chairman needs to respond to everyone's concerns as a councilor. And it was pointed out to him by a fellow councilor who brought up a point about whether this person should speak. The chairman did take that input from that councilor and agreed with them. But we, as a board, overruled that decision. So we acted as a board. Words can be said that could be offensive to someone, where it would not be offensive to others. So I think that's part of the problem. In the area of time to communicate what was going on, things were said, and as reflected in the last meeting's minutes, which we can see, that I believe a statement was made by the chairman that clarified that, and I think in that case, that's all I can say. I think it should have ended there.
Anyone else to the complaint in front of us?
I'll speak to it.
Councilman Lund?
The complaint at face value is actually, I would say, is not too big of a deal. The problem is that Mr. Pearl came forward, and first he preemptively gave us 10 hours notice of his evidence that he laid out in chronological order. What Mr. Pearl did was he gave us 10 hours in which to reflect on his supposition or his summary statement that he felt that the chair was being dishonest. And when he came here and he sat before us, he started down delivering that, and he was gavelled down. But the chair knew, and 2 weeks after the fact, the chair has admitted that he was dishonest with Mr. Pearl.
If I could just stop, I really want to pull the whole council back in and to simply keep to the complaint at hand. And the complaint at hand does have to do with the attempt to quiet public opinion. At this point, I do not see that we are discussing the other complaints against our current chair.
If I may.
Yes, certainly.
That evening, I made the comment that I disagreed with the path that Mr. Pearl was going down, but I defended his right to say it. And I think that that's really at the crux, and it goes to Mr. Sullivan's comment that he proactively provided information. If he had just showed up to speak, in my opinion, none of what occurred would have happened, but that's mere conjecture on my part. Agree or disagree, we overruled, and I believe we voted unanimously to allow him to speak. So in my opinion, that concludes this particular issue. And he was allowed to speak, and it was entered into the record, and we voted unanimously to allow, including the chair, voted in the affirmative.
I want to just step back. Councilor Lozada, I did interrupt you. Did you have additional statements you wanted to make?
Well, I guess if I'm going to back off that, we're saying that, let me put this.
At this point, I'd like to stick with the complaint at hand.
That's fine. But I'd like to make this statement. We've got a little bit of a quandary here because we're beyond the complaint stage. And I think everyone needs to realize that. You can take one and the other, but when you go to the second, you solve the first. Because ultimately, Mr. Pearl came before with a complaint, in his complaint, saying that the chair is dishonest. Now I understand we don't want to talk about the second, but the second is a confirmation fact. So it's a difficult quandary we're faced here.
Are we speaking of the second